Okay, a quick just intro as to who we are as a company. I've got a mixed audience here of both customers and non-customers. We are the world leader in JDE analysis and reporting. JDE specific reporting and analysis. We've been around for 17 years. We have over 50,000 users that use the software each and every day. That's over 500 customers around the world. And we have 40 partners. I do want to give a shout out to Ndevr. You've got a lot of people on today, and Andrew and Brian and all of you at Ndevr. We appreciate you being here. I also want to give a shout out to Michael Perry. Hey, Michael, hope you're doing well, bud. Good seeing you on the webinar, man. Anyway, that's who we are as a company, and several products I want to talk about. So DAS, Data Access Studio, is our flagship report writing software, and then we have several additional little tools that bolt onto that. Probably the most prevalent is the Automator, which allows you to automate all of your reports. And then we have templates, which are a package of about 500 plus pre-built reports that you can use out of the box. And then we've got Mobi, which is our data warehouse and portal. And we're going to be covering Mobi today in depth. And then Easy Shapes allows you to take any shape that you want, trace it, and turn that into a dashboard easily. DAS Archive is something that many of our customers that turn JDE Edwards maintenance off use DAS Archive so they can access their reports and their data. No longer have JDE. So that's the product suite that we have and know and love. Invite you to link up with us on LinkedIn and follow us on LinkedIn. We do push out content occasionally, and also on Twitter. So today, ReportsNow versus Power BI. It's a real-time shootout. We are going to go through the exact same report using both DAS, and then we're going to do it with Power BI. But before we get into that, I've got a 10-minute little intro here where I want to talk about just BI in general. And everybody knows what BI is, but I want to cover this a little bit just so you guys can kind of get an idea of where we're going with this shootout. So, IBM started this whole thing in 1958 when Hans Peter Lund wrote a white paper. I went recently back and read that white paper, and I'm not kidding you. It's Google's business plan. I mean, it's basically Google for microfiche. It's a pretty interesting read, but that's how it all started with that white paper. 30 years in the future, Howard Dressner with Gartner came out and gave a talk at a conference. And in that talk, he came up with two new phrases that we'd heard for the very first time. One was data warehouse, and one was ETL. Extract, transform, and load, which is what DAS does. So most of us today, if we have BI, we're using the 30-year-old technology that Howard Dressner was talking about at the time. In 2016, Gartner came out with a brand new study, and they had been doing these studies for a while, but it's significant that on this day in 2016, they changed the study completely, and they dropped several products from the study. Two of the products that they dropped was Oracle's OBIEE, and they also dropped IBM's Cognos. And they dropped them because on that day, they said, listen, we're far enough in the future now to where BI really should be self-service. It should no longer be just an IT thing. The masses should be able to do this themselves. And so they dropped anything that they deemed a non-self-service from the study. And I think that this is really important because we need to understand that Gartner has kind of a mixed message here. They're telling us on one hand, you need self-service. On the other hand, the three tools in their greatest quadrant that they're measuring don't really even work with JDE Edwards that well. And so the purpose of today is to show you when you compare a JDE niche tool like DAS to a non-JDE niche tool like a Power BI, what do you get? So when you look at BI as a whole, this is what they call the BI maturity model. And it begins with raw data. And you go from raw data to cleansed data. And in a JDE environment, all of our data, for the most part, is already cleansed from a format perspective. The formats are all the same, and we have 5,000 tables. The tables are what they are. Now, we may have some data in there that needs to be massaged, and that can be done, hopefully, in a self-service way. For the most part, though, when you're talking about non-JDE stuff, going from raw data to cleansed data is strictly an IT function. IT does that. From a JDE perspective, the cleansed data probably belongs to both IT and to non-IT, because I think we as business people can probably cleanse some data ourselves. The next stage in the BI evolution would be standardized reporting, and every single organization on this call today has some form of standardized reporting. But I doubt we're really where the model says we need to be. We should be at a point where we know how many reports are we using as a business, who gets what, why was it written in the first place, and how often is it ran. And most of us don't know that. And so I think if we're looking to get as far as we want to get with BI, this is where it begins. So we need to understand the data that we're extracting from the system. And most of us don't know that. If we take it one step further to analytics, to me, this is what most of us think of as dashboards. Some type of visualization layer where we're really asking questions and we're getting answers to questions, and we're really answering what they call KPIs, key performance indicators. And most of the time when I see people that do have analytics and they are running with it, most of them have kind of rolled this out at a business unit level. So maybe finance has something, maybe a business unit here or there has something. But as a whole, the entire entity has probably not embraced analytics yet. And if you have, again, we probably don't know who's getting what KPI, why, how often, and why was it built the way it was built in the first place. And I think we as business people need to answer those questions before we begin rolling things out. We need to really think about things and do it intentionally. And then these last two here are really kind of all organizations today are probably doing planning as well. And some, it may be spreadsheet planning, but you're doing it. I think in the future, this is where things are going to change a whole lot. I think that in the future, most of our planning will be AI. So some machine learning algorithm will be doing the planning for us. And we may give it some parameters and things, and that thing may run at night, and we'll come back in the next morning and it will be built for us. But I think as we move into the future here, these last two bubbles here, planning and prediction, I think today that belongs mostly to the business. In the future, it's going to belong mostly to IT. And this last piece here, prediction. This is going to be all AI, AI and things like sensors. So this is going to be a situation where, we've got a shop floor with a piece of machinery. It has a sensor on the machine that can detect vibrations, and the AI algorithm knows that when the machine vibrates, typically the production line goes down for the next 2 days. And the AI algorithm automatically sends a human being out to fix the machine before it breaks. That's prediction. That's one form of prediction. There's many forms of prediction. The important thing to note here is that, when you look at these different pieces, the piece I'm calling data access is where IT takes data and they massage that data into a format and they stick it into a data warehouse, or they stick it somewhere that is now accessible from the business. And they probably also own half of cleaning up the data that exists in JDE Edwards as well. Over here on the right-hand side is machine learning, and I've already talked about in the future that planning and prediction will be a whole lot of IT. So if you look at those two pieces by themselves, that's about 15% of all data operations. This overwhelming piece in the middle, this 85%, that is operational reporting and analytics, and the business should be doing that. That's what Gartner is telling us. And I think most of us are not here yet, and you could be here. And it's a topic for a different time, but the problem here is data literacy. And I think that every organization on earth right now should be talking about their data literacy efforts internally. And in fact, Gartner says that this year, 80% of companies are looking at their data literacy internally to make sure that they're literate, that they can actually speak data. So we'll talk about that at a different time, but I just want to give you guys a quick overview of why it's important to be thinking about self-service. And while you think about self-service and you see Anna's presentation today, I'm hoping that you see some real differences between self-service in DAS and self-service in Power BI. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Anna.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alan. Okay, cool. So I'm going to become the presenter. Also, it looks like Robert maybe can't hear. Cool. So, guys, we are going to, like Alan said, create the same F0411 accounts payable detail report in both Power BI and in DAS to compare and contrast some of the similarities and differences when connecting natively to JDE. So with that, I'm going to start by creating it in DAS. If you haven't seen it before, this is our software here at ReportsNow. Right on the top, we have what we call the Google-like search, where we can search by either the naming convention. So the F0411, for example, is the one we're going to be using today. Or if I wanted to search by the actual name instead, I can search by those English names as well. I also have access to the about 8,000 different business views that we connect to within JDE as well from here. So in this case, I will just be opening up that F0411, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the creation of our report. Okay, so I'm just going to start by getting some sample data in order to create my report without having to wait for the entirety of the data to run. So I'll just go ahead and highlight some of the columns that I want to use in my report. These are going to include document information, address number, a couple dates, and then a couple amounts as well. So I'll just show only those columns. The next thing I want to do is some rearranging. So I'll place address number at the front, and then I'll go ahead and rename it vendor number. From here, I can add some associated descriptions. So, for example, if I'm looking at my report right now and I wanted to pull in the descriptive name for that vendor number that I'm seeing here, it's as easy as double clicking. So now I have that vendor name pulled in specific to each of those numbers. I can go ahead and rename it as such. And then I'm also going to pull in my document type description, again, just by that easy double click, and I'll call this dough tie description. Okay. The next thing I want to do from here is some calculations. So in my report, I want 3 different calculations. The first one is going to be a difference between my gross amount and my open amount. So I can highlight those and then do a quick calculation. It's going to be under the math section. And our software actually knows what type of field that we're looking at. So right now I can see I don't have a lot of date options because I'm not currently selected on dates. In this case, I'm just going to be doing a difference, and I will call this field amount paid. The second calculation I'm going to do is a date difference between my due date and my invoice date. Again, that's going to be quick calculations, but this time I have a list of date options because, again, DAS knows that these are date fields. I'll select my date difference, and then I can call this days to pay. We give you access to about 50 of the over 100 different calculations directly from the grid through this quick calculations option. In this case, I want to do a concatenation of my vendor number and my vendor name so that both number and name are listed within the bounds of one column like you're seeing here. Once we've done these calculations, we are almost ready to create something like a dashboard off of this report. However, I need some location information on that dashboard because I want to be able to create a core plus map, so a shape map, to say maybe by state, what's my total gross amount sold. Now to pull in information like the state, in your guys' case, it would not be state, it would, or maybe it would. I don't know what they are called in Australia. But any location information, I can do that by pulling in from a different table in JDE. So I'll head over to design calculations. I will create a table lookup calculation. And in this case, I know that I'm going for the F0116, which is my address by dates table. If If I didn't know that I was looking for the address by dates table, I can actually search by name here and then find that information. I will have to use my asterisk. So I can see address by date will appear here as well. Once I do that, I can connect my fields in common. So in this case, it will be address number to vendor number or AN8 to AN8. And then I can pull back any and all fields from my F0116 that I would like to use in my report. In this case, address line, postal code, city, state, and country. Once I do that, I'm almost done. However, with this address by date table, there could be one vendor that has multiple addresses. I want to make sure that I'm getting the most recent address. So all I'm going to do here is change the sort order to look at my start effective date for that address and only return my first value. So row to fetch is equal to 1. Once I've set that up, I can go ahead and save and close and see that my addresses are now being returned. From here, I'm done with my report. I'll go ahead and save it. Probably should have done that earlier. So once I save that, I can go and create my dashboard. So in DAS, we give you access to dashboarding as well. I'll go ahead and select the Add Dashboard option on the top of my screen. I can select the same option for my home screen, but in this case, since I'm already in my report, it just makes more sense to select it here. And now I need to link it to the report that I will use in order to create this dashboard. In this case, it's just my AP detail right here. So I'll select it and then select OK. So any dashboard that you create is going to be based off of any report that you create to begin with. From here, I want to create a few different visualizations in my dashboard. So the first one I'm going to do is that choropleth map I talked about, so a shape map. In this case, I am going to use the United States just because that's what my demo data has for me. So I can change the default map to the United States. Alan also mentioned easy shapes earlier. We actually allow you to import custom shape maps here as well if you would like to use shape maps of regions or of a body, if you're looking at an injury report, something like that. So in this case, I'll just pull in my state as my attribute and my gross amount as my value. You'll notice that I'm not yet having any results pulled in, and that's actually because I have to link the state attribute. So if I look at my underlying data and I look in my state field, I can see that it's currently set to this 2-digit code. So in my link, I have to make sure that I'm matching the state name to the 2-digit code. In this case, it's going to be my postal field here in the end. Once I link that, I can now see a tooltip showing the different gross amount totals by state in the United States. The next visual I want to create is going to be a bar chart. So I'll go ahead and select the chart option. Maybe I want to look again at gross amount as the value, but this time I want to look over time based off of the due date. So I can pull in due date as my argument. It will default to showing us the year, but maybe I only want to look at it by month. And I can see January through December here for any months that do have data in them. The last visual that I want to create is a set of cards that allows me to actually click into different business units in order to filter these other two visuals with it. However, if I look at my list of values here, I don't have any business unit field. So what I can do is head back over to my report, select design columns, and pull in that business unit. And then I'll go ahead and double click my business unit just to get that associated description for business unit. I can call it BU description and then save my report. Once I've done that, if I head over back to my dashboard, I can see that those fields are now available to use. So if I wanted to create my deck of cards, again, that's going to allow us to actually click and interact with these different business units. I can pull the cards in. I'll pull in my business unit description as my series, and then again, just pull in my gross amount as my actual. And now I can see a list of my different business units here. The last thing I need to do is turn on the interaction in order to actually filter and utilize all of these visuals as filter elements. So in this case, I'm selected on my business units, and if I select multiple master filter, I can now select one or multiple cards in order to change the results that I'm seeing in my other visuals. So in under 10 minutes, probably closer to maybe 6 or 7 minutes, I was able to create an entire accounts payable report based off of the F0411 table within JD Edwards. I was able to do a table lookup and access additional information from a different JD Edwards table. And then I was able to create this dashboard here that allows interaction between the different units as well. With that, I'm ready to go over to the Power BI side now and create a similar output so that I can compare and contrast the differences between these two softwares. Okay, so if you haven't seen it before, this is Power BI. The first thing we're going to do here is connect to our JDE source. So in this case, our JDE connection is a SQL Server connection. So I'll go ahead and select that SQL Server option here. Once that loads, I will need to enter my server name, and then I have two different data connectivity modes here. The first one is import, and the second one is direct query. Direct query is actually going to be your more real-time connection to the JD Edwards tables. However, when you do direct query within Power BI, you lose the ability to access this data tab, which means you can't perform any DAX calculation languages, which is what Microsoft calls it. So for that case, we do need to perform some calculations in that page. So we're going to go ahead and select import instead of direct query, which means we're getting a near-time connection instead of real-time. So once we select import, we're trying to go to the page where we can then select which report we're creating or which table we're creating a report off of. In this case, my connection is JDE development. So you'll see that it actually loads in those 5,000 pristine tables that JDE gives you. However, two things here. Like you saw in DAS, when we were on the home page, we had access to actually type in those English names, type in any business views, or type in the naming conventions. In the Power BI side, we can see that we only have access to the under 5,000 pristine tables within JDE. We also don't have access. That means we don't have access to any of the business views. We also don't have access to any of the English names. So I couldn't search accounts payable here and have anything come up. So if I didn't know that the naming convention for the table that we're creating this report off of was the F0411, I would actually have to do some preliminary research within JDE before being able to actually create anything. Two options here, load or transform. We do have to do a few additional data preparation things, so we are going to select transform data here. By selecting transform data, I'm actually going to be opening something within Power BI called the Power Query Editor, and it opened on my other screen. So once it loads, I'll pull it over. Come on. So this Power Query Editor is where we're going to make most of the changes in terms of the data preparation. I can see that because I selected import, I will need to refresh my data to the most recent version based off of its connection to JDE. However, it doesn't automatically refresh. Whereas every time you come into DAS, created report or new table, it's going to be the most recent version of the data. Once we're in here, I want you guys to notice a couple things right off the bat. If you look at all of these column captions, we can see that these were returned as the aliases. So we don't have those English names. Whereas within DAS, when we open our report, we immediately had access to all of these names, so we knew what they were called. In this case, I know that my DOC alias is actually my document number, so I'll go ahead and rename that document number. Now, for my report, I'm going to have to do quite a bit of renaming. So what I've done is actually created some code that renames all of my columns at once. To enter that code, I'm going to enter the advanced editor. This utilizes something called the M language within Power BI or Power Query Editor. And I just pasted in my previously typed in code to transfer all of those aliases that we needed to those English names, gross amount, pay item, whatever that may be. So I'll go ahead and select done and wait for that to load. Once that does, I can see that the columns that I chose to rename have changed. Now, the next step that we performed within DAS was actually selecting, I guess technically this was the first step within DAS, selecting the fields that I wanted to use in my report. In this case, that process is going to be pretty similar. I'll just select choose columns and then only choose the columns that I chose to rename. I don't need to include pay item, but I do want those dates and those amounts, as well as that document number information and vendor information. So quite a few additional steps we've taken already to get to the same point as what we got when we initially opened DAS. that 411 report. I'll drag my vendor number to the front. And then the next step that we performed within DAS, one of my favorite steps because it's so easy and very powerful, is just that double click to pull in that associated description for both our vendor name as well as our document type description. Now within Power BI, because this is not a native connection to JDE, it does take a few more steps here. So if we're looking at our vendor number, we want to pull in the associated description here as well as the associated description for our document type. To do that, I actually need to go back into my recent source and my connection to JDE and then pull in the tables that description is coming from. In the case of vendor number, that table is going to be the F0101, our address book master. And in the case of document type, it's going to be the F0005 or the JDE data dictionary. Again, if I didn't know the naming conventions for either of these tables that did have the descriptive names, I would actually need to go into JDE and figure out what those naming conventions were before I was able to pull in any results. So I'll go ahead and check both of these fields, the F0101 and the F0005. And then I'm going to select OK. I'll again select the import option here once this loads. And then I can wait for those new queries to appear. So again, I just want to reiterate, in DAS, this was a double click. In Power BI, it's actually a connection back to the original location of the description. So the first description I want to pull in is my vendor name. So I can see here I have the AN8 alias from the 101. That's going to be the field that we use to connect into our 411 report to match with our vendor number. And then I also have this ALPH name. So that's actually the descriptive name. This is the field we are going to be pulling in as the associated description. Again, I'm going to refresh this data just so we have the most recent, and I'll do the same thing with our other report as well. So in order to connect these two data sources and pull in that description, I need to do something called merge queries. This is going to bring up a wizard that looks similar to something like a table join or a lookup, where I'm connecting two tables together. I'm selecting the fields that they connect off of, in this case, AN8 to AN8, or those vendor numbers. I can see that the selection matched all of the rows or all but one of the rows from the first table, so that is what I want. I can go ahead and select OK. I can see now that I have this connection created. I only need to return my alpha field or that descriptive name. So I'll just select that column and then rename and place it next to my vendor number. So an associated description without something that actually knows how to talk to JDE does take some time to figure out how those fields connect, what table am I trying to pull that descriptive name from, and then actually doing the process. The next description I wanted to pull in was our document type description. Now this is coming from the JDE data dictionary, which means that there are multiple descriptions beyond just document type within the JDE data dictionary table or the F0005. That means that I actually have to do some preliminary filtering in order to get my list to just be the document type descriptions. Now, to save time, I already have identified what filtering I need to do. In this case, I want to select system code 00. And then this RT alias, I only want to return the type of DT, which is my document type. From there, I'm now looking only at the descriptions for document type. Now, if I didn't know what filtering needed to happen before I was able to just get those associated descriptions, that would be another step that you had to perform within the JDE data dictionary on JDE before being able to do it here. Last thing here, this is actually the document type code that we're going to be connecting to. However, I can see that it has leading zeros. So before I'm even able to merge those queries, I still need to trim those leading spaces, which I just did using the format trim option within Power Query Editor. And now I'm ready to merge those queries. Let's head back over to home and then merge those queries. Again, it's that table join table lookup type wizard. And then I'm joining DRKY to my document type. I can see that the selection matches all of my rows from the first table. If I were to select a different field, I can see that the selection does not match. So this is how I know that that's the alias. and I'll select OK. Again, I want to select only my descriptive field, which is the DL01, and then I can move it on my page and rename it dough tie description. So just the associated description, just that double click in DAS takes quite a few more steps within Power BI, and that's me already knowing where I needed to get the tables from, what tables I needed, what filtering I needed to do in order to create these connections. With that, I am ready to head back over to the Power BI side because I'm still in Power Query Editor right now. However, I don't need to load in these two other tables. I use them to pull in descriptive names, but now I can disenable the load on both of those tables here. Once I do that, I'll go ahead and close and apply my changes to Power Query Editor. So once we've done that, the next thing we did within DAS, once we pulled in those associated descriptions, was actually to create the three calculations. So we had the amount paid calculation, we had the days to pay calculation, and we had our vendor concatenation calculation. So let's go ahead and go over to Power BI, wait for this to load, and then we'll do those three different calculations. Like I said, because we did an import query, we still have access to this data tab, which is where we're going to be doing our calculations. If we would have selected the direct query option, the more real-time option, we would no longer have access to this data tab. Once my data loads, I can see on the left-hand side of my Power BI screen that I have a list of all of the fields that I pulled into my report from the 411, as well as that document type description and the vendor name. I'll head over to my data tab and then see that my data is returned in a report format here. One difference here, you can't easily export this report that you've created. There's no export button to just turn this into a PDF or a PDF and Excel, anything like that from this page. Okay, so a couple things I want you guys to notice here. When I'm looking at my report, I took the time to do that renaming. However, there are some additional steps I need to take before I'm ready to pull in my address information and then create my dashboard. The first one is if I'm looking at vendor number 1001 and document number 1579, I can see that my gross amount is listed as $250,000. However, if I'm on the DAS side, and I'm just going to filter this, so again, I can look at vendor number 1001, document number 1579, I can see my actual gross amount is only $2,500. So that's quite a bit less. The key thing to note here is that Power BI, because of its connectivity nature to JDE, doesn't know how to read the decimal places like JDE stores them. That means that this is quite a bit off from the actual gross amount for this specific vendor number and document number. However, there are instances where within one table, JDE may be storing some individual amounts as 2 decimal places, some as 4 decimal places, some as 3, which means it's not as easy as just dividing this gross amount by 100. In this case, I'm not going to take the time to actually do that. It is quite a complicated process to figure out how to read those JDE decimal places and pull that out. So we're just going to leave that and understand that this is not being pulled in correctly.
Hey, Anna.
Yep.
I just want to give Clinton and Jim a quick note to let them know that I will answer their questions at the end. Proceed, sorry.
Cool. No, sounds good. Yep, so we'll have a little bit of time at the end to help answer any questions. The next thing I want to point out in terms of formatting are these two dates here. So JDE, when storing dates, actually stores them in a custom Julian date format that can't be easily transferred to a date. So if I just transfer this and change the data type to select the date time option, I'll give it a second to load, but I wanted to show you guys what this does because it doesn't know how to read this JDE format. It reads it as a normal Julian date format, which means that it's thinking that it's the year 2220, which is quite a distance away. This is not actually supposed to be in the year 2220. So I'm going to go ahead and change that back to the whole number. To figure out how to get this into a readable date that I could use in something like my bar chart showing over time what's my total gross amount. A calculation. So that calculation is actually going to be one that I'm going to paste in here. I typed it out previously because it is pretty long. For every date that is formatted incorrectly when pulled into Power BI, I will have to copy and paste a different calculation in. So I can see this one is the one for my invoice date specifically. I had to pull out the year based off of a specific number of values within this custom Julian date format. And then I pulled out the day of year and then calculated it to get the month, day, and year that is correct for this invoice date. I'm going to repeat the same process again for my due date. So I can see it is pulling in. I am in the US format of dates right now, month, day, and year. But you could change that here if you wanted to change it to day, month, and year. So once I've created my invoice date formatted, I will need to repeat the same process for my due date. So again, I will be using a new calculation. I typed it out previously just to save myself some time here. And I can see that this one is specific to my due date and will reference my due date as well from here. So after a few more steps of formatting that wasn't necessary at all within DAS because of the native connection to JDE, I'm ready now to create some of those calculations. So the first calculation that I did within DAS was to do the difference between gross amount and open amount in order to get my amount paid. In Power BI, it's going to work pretty similar, but instead of actually just highlighting them and doing it from the grid, I'm going to be using another little typed out formula. In this case, my column name is going to be amount paid, same as it was on my other report as well. And then I'm just going to type out gross amount minus open amount. Okay, so I'll type that out and then I have my amount paid calculation. The next one I want to create is a days to pay calculation to look at the date difference between my due date and my invoice date. Again, because these aren't formatted in a readable format, I will have to use my due date formatted and my invoice date formatted fields in order to create this calculation. So if I wouldn't have changed that formatting to create these dates here, I would not be able to have a date difference. In this case, this is another one that I previously typed out. I can see that I have a date difference here between my invoice date and my due date, finding the difference in days. The last calculation that I want to do is a concatenation between my vendor number and my vendor name. Again, to do this, I actually just highlighted both of those fields and did it from the grid within DAS. In the Power BI side, it is going to be that typing the formula option at the top of my screen. It's called the DAX calculation language, not to be confused with DAS, which is our software. So I can see here I have my concatenation. I can't use the concat calculation that Power BI offers because it only allows you to concatenate 2 items. In this case, because I want there to be a space dash space in between my vendor number and my vendor name, it has to be 3 items, which means I have to know the syntax, these ampersands here, in order to connect these 2 fields together. Okay, so once I've done those calculations, I'm at the point where I'm ready to now pull in that address information. Within DAS, what I did was that table lookup. So I was able to either search by English name or by naming convention to grab my FO116 address by dates table. I selected the fields that they had in common, and then I was able to pull back any and all fields from the target table that I needed. So if I wanted to add additional fields that I may have originally forgotten, I can easily do that here as well. In Power BI, it does get a little bit more complicated. Before we actually create the calculation, we need to pull in the FO116 table again from our data source. So I'll go ahead and select SQL Server connection again. Actually, instead, I can just go to recent sources. So I'm going to close this so I don't have to type anything. And then again, just connect to my JDE connection. Okay, once that loads, I will have to know the name that I'm going to be looking for within the JDE development pristine tables. I can't type in address by date and expect anything to appear. I will have to know that I'm looking for the F0116. Okay, so once those load, I can go ahead and type that in and search for it here. Okay, and then I have to do some preliminary changes, including changing some of these descriptive names that we're seeing from the aliases to something that I can actually understand. So I'll go ahead and select transform. That will take me back into the Power Query editor where I can make those changes. So once that loads, the first thing I'll do is actually some renaming to change those aliases to names that I know how to read and understand, so that when I create the connection and pull in that state and address information, I know what I'm looking at. I'll just start by naming this vendor number. And then once I name that, I can use the advanced editor to save some time and actually just paste in my previously typed out code that I created to rename some additional columns, things like effective date, address line, postal code, city, and state. So once I make those changes, I can go ahead and choose the columns that I want to see returned. Same as with my FL411 report, I will be selecting just the columns that I took the time to rename. Again, if you didn't know that the aliases stood for some specific value, it would be a longer process of looking in JDE and figuring out, okay, what alias stands for postal code and where can I rename that within my Power BI data. Now, for the connection that I'm going to be creating between the 411 and the 116, I'm going to actually be doing it within the DAX calculation language. So I'll go ahead and close and apply my changes and head over to my data tab. One additional thing, and this is something to do with our demo data, we don't have the greatest demo data for dates within the FL116 table, so I'm just going to quickly randomly generate a date between 2016 and today so that we know how to connect our fields together into the 411 report. So to do that, I'll go over to the 116 and then just select new column and paste my code in there to generate that random date. Okay, so once I've generated the random date, I want to pull in my address information, and I'm just going to filter this to only show me fields that actually have addresses in them. I want to pull in my address information to my 411 report so that I can use it to create my dashboard. Now, I'm not going to take the time to actually pull each of these columns in because each column is a separate calculation. So I have all of these calculations actually typed out and saved, but just for the sake of time, I'm only going to import the state calculation because that's the one we'll be using in our dashboard output. So I'll go ahead and select new column. And this calculation did take me quite a bit of time to figure out how that connection was going to be created. In this case, I'm connecting my fields off of vendor number, and then I'm finding the first record that I see based off of that effective date, and then returning just my state field like I can see here. So once I do that, I will now have a field called current state within my 411 report. With that, I can go ahead and save my report, AP report, and then I'm ready to create my dashboard. So the visual output that we created here, in the DAS side, this report that we created, this AP detail, took us less than 5 minutes to create. In Power BI, without that native connectivity to JDE, the formatting is something that we had to work with, the associated descriptions we had to pull in separately, the table information from the address by date took some time. So everything here just kind of was a longer process for us. With that, though, we are ready to create our visual output. So same thing we did on the DAS side. Let's start by creating a shape map to show gross amount by state. In this case, it's going to be a similar process. So I'll pull in my gross amount as my color saturation, and I will pull in my current state, if I can find it, as my location. So I can see those states fill, and again, I'll have the tooltip showing the total gross amount by each of the states. The next visual that I created was a bar chart. So I'll go ahead and select the bar chart option. Again, I want to look at gross amount as my value, and then I looked at my due date, I have to make sure that I'm selecting the formatted option here, because again, it doesn't know how to read those dueling date formats. It will be pulling in first by year, but I only want to look at it by month, so I can remove the year, quarter, and day options here. And now I can see month over month, what's my total gross amount. Like I said earlier, the formatting for gross amount is incorrect because Power BI doesn't know how to read the number of decimal places the way that JDE stores it. So these numbers are not going to be exactly the same as the ones you're seeing within the DAS dashboard. However, conceptually, in terms of creating the visuals, it's going to be similar. The last thing that we pulled into DAS was this set of cards allowing us to click and show the different business units. However, to do that, we just head back over to the report side and then went design columns and pulled that business unit in. From there, it was a simple double click to get the description, and that's the field we used. So about 4 or 5 steps, taking 30 seconds or less to create these cards. In Power BI, we don't have access to the business units right now. So what we actually have to do is go back to Power Query Editor. So our data transformation and data preparation tool, the Power Query Editor, which is where we've been making all the changes in formatting for our report. If I select Choose Columns from my 411 report, because we've applied some additional steps since we took out the columns, we no longer have access to any columns that aren't in our report. So I actually have to go back to a previously applied steps. In this case, it's going to be removed other columns and then choose columns from here in order to insert a step and add back that business unit. Now, this took me a while to figure out as well. I couldn't figure out why those results weren't automatically pulling for me. But I did figure it out. I can see here that I'm grabbing my MCU alias. For some reason, these all start with RP, so we can see that here, and I'll just pull that in. So now I have this MCU. I need to make sure I go back to the last applied step so that any calculations and additional field information that I pulled in is still included here. This is my business unit, so that's what I'll call it. In DAS, we just did a double click to pull in that description. Because the process for pulling in a description in Power BI does take some additional time, it requires me to go back to the connection. It requires me to know and pull in the base table for that description. In this case, it would be the F0006, the business unit master. And then it requires me to merge queries in order to pull that in. To save some time, we're not going to do that. So we'll just use the business unit number instead of the name. But just know that pulling in that description is going to take a few more steps within Power Query Editor before we're able to use it for anything. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and select the multi-row card visual option. Oh, it does have to apply changes. Sorry about that. Once we apply changes from our field list on the left-hand side, we should see our business unit also included in the 411 report. So any changes that we made should be applied here. And we can see now that business unit is included. So with that, I'm ready to create my visual. I'll go ahead and select the multi-row card option and then just expand it all the way down and select my business unit as the field. Now I can see all my different business units listed here. However, I can't actually click on any of these. There is a workaround, including which involves using a slicer to actually be able to select these different business units in order to filter, but the actual multi-row card visual within Power BI doesn't allow for that. So that's pretty much the same output on Power BI and DAS. DAS with its connectivity to JDE helped us to skip a lot of steps and speed up the processing time of our report creation so that when we got to the visual output, it was a lot easier for us to do this. With that said, we understand that Power BI offers quite a few visual outputs that are very cool, very intelligent, some AI visuals, stuff that DAS doesn't yet offer within their dashboard capabilities. If those visuals are something that you guys need access to, what we've done is gone and created a connection from Power BI to actually access Mobi data. So in DAS, if I'm in my report and I want to publish a report to Mobi, which is our online data warehouse, it's a web-based data warehouse that we have created that's where you're going to actually publish any and all dashboards you create in DAS. But if I just wanted to publish my report, it's as easy as me going to export all grid data to Mobi. That'll pull up a little option asking which data box and snapshot I want to create, and then I can just select OK. In this case, I've already actually published it, so I can just head over to Power BI. Now, if I want to pull in my already formatted report, that means I have the correct number of decimal places on my amounts, the correct date formats, any calculations or additional table lookup information that I wanted to pull, all of my associated descriptions. If I wanted to do that on the DAS side and then utilize Power BI for the visuals, I can select Get Data and then More. And then once that loads, it'll load in all possible connections that Power BI has set up. We've actually created a custom connector to connect to the Mobi data warehouse. Should be up in 1 second, hopefully.
Well, while you're fidgeting with that, I can answer a couple questions here. So Jim Shaw had a question. Jim, you can hit external data whenever you'd like to. In today's conversation, we deliberately kept it easy because this little AP demo that you see in DAS that Anna started out with today, it's what I do when I'm demoing the software. It typically takes me about, of my 1 hour presentation that I do for a demo, it's typically 5 minutes of the presentation. And so I wanted to show you all that we weren't trying to pick and choose here. We wanted to really be, agnostic here and pick something simple so you guys can see the real differences between hitting JDE with Power BI versus DAS. But Jim, you can hit any table that you want to hit, and anything that you can use SQL against, you can also use DAS against. Sorry, Anna, go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, so I'm just setting up the connection to Mobi. Once I set it up once, I can always access it from recent sources, which is probably my best course of action. But in this case, that just involved me typing in the SQL Server name and the data box name as well. So, I just closed this again. So once this loads, I have access to any and all reports that I have published to Mobi. So if I have an AP detail report that I created previously, I can see here AP detail for Power BI. I can go ahead and select that and actually load in that data. Now it is going to take a second to load, but once it loads in the first time, you'll be able to use it for any of the visualizations that you're trying to create additional reports off of it, go ahead and access recent sources and open it again in a new Power BI folder, anything like that. With this connection set up, nope, I don't. We'll just give it a second to load and then I can show you guys what that looks like to have that created. And I'm not sure that this is going to be exactly the same report, but it will be a similar output here that we're seeing. Do we have any other questions? I know we're kind of...
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of questions about external data and hitting data from other systems. And we might want to show off how we do that real quick. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so if you're connecting to an external data connection, it's going to be the little database icon on DAS. That same icon is also available from the new section. So I can see external data report here at the bottom. Once I'm in here, I can select new and then select one of my connection options. In this case, client connections would be things that are specific to your computer. So if I have an Excel file that I wanted to connect to, an Access database, a SQL personal database that I have, anything like that, I can select that client connection, but I also have access to set up server connections so that anyone within my company could use it. So if you have an Excel on a shared drive or something like that, a SQL database, anything like that, you can do that here. So you can see that our list of connections is available here. If I'm connecting to something like Excel, I would just select that option, browse for an Excel file. So maybe I have this Excel file here. I can test the connection, and then once it's succeeded, I'm ready to create a report off of that connection.
Yeah, and for Jared and Clinton, I think, who asked that question, I mean, databases would be the same way. The difference is a database would be a server-side connection, and then in the admin console, you all could grant access to specific people or everyone, and you have a little more control that way as well. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was just going to say, so like this is an Excel file that I pulled in and all the data is just here for me to use. So any external data connection, whether that's Excel or a server connection, something like a SQL database, you can now create any calculations that are accessible normally within DAS. So any calculations that you want to do, if you want to create a dashboard off of that data, if you want to connect it then to some JDE data, you can do that here.
Yeah, and then I had one question. Can we export SQL and import that into Power BI? And the answer is no, you cannot export SQL, but you do have the Mobi connector. So what you would do is you would export your data to Mobi, and then you would go into Power BI and you would connect to it like Anna just did using our Mobi connector. And the cool thing about that is, I mean, the hardest part for me when I began playing around, so you've got to learn 3 languages when you learn Power BI. You've got to learn M, which is Power Query, in the M language. And you've got to learn DAX, which is the data analysis syntax language, which she fiddled with a bit in this as well. And then you've got to learn the language of visualizations. The cool thing about doing everything in DAS and then exporting it to Mobi and then having your Power BI connect to our Mobi connector is you don't need to worry about any of the extract and transform piece at all. I mean, all you really need to worry about is visualizations, which makes things a lot easier. And I don't want to write code anymore. I don't have time. That's what IT does really well. Business people don't have the time for that. We've got real jobs. So not that IT is not a real job. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have other things that keep us busy. And learning code is tough. So I prefer to just drag and drop. Go ahead. Or you got more to show?
I'm done. That's all I have. Yep.
Okay, and then Clinton also wants to know, can we load in themes into DAS? We do have themes, Clinton, but they're not as cool as Power BI, where you get to load in your JSON file and you're good to go. So I mean, we obviously, I think the really cool thing about DAS and about Mobi is I think it gets you 80% of the way there faster than anything. But like Anna said, if you want to take advantage of like better visualizations, I think the way to go would be to use something like a Power BI or a Tableau. I mean, they have every visualization you can think of, but use DAS to do all of the ETL and just hit it with that. But I think, and with all these tools, I don't care whether it's Tableau, Power BI, or DAS, there's give and take with all of them. Like you already noticed that their card widget doesn't allow you to click on it. Ours does. We don't allow you to import JSON files for themes. They do. So I think it's give and take with all of them.
Yep. And I will say, so if anyone does want more information, you do need Mobi to set up this connection. Alan, who would be the best person to email for that if they're interested?
Yeah, so if this is a good point. Thanks, Anna. I mean, by the way, if any of you all want to see some one-on-one stuff, Anna and I are here. That's what we do. I mean, and we're a no-pressure sales organization. We're honestly more of a training organization. So we're accessible. You can email either one of us. It's real simple. ALAN, Alan at reportsnow.com, Anna at reportsnow.com. We're accessible. I invite you to email us. We'll do a quick one-on-one go-to meeting. We'll answer any questions you've got. If you want a bigger, broader demo, we can hook that up. And again, it is easy, you all. We're not going to bombard you with sales tactics. We just want to get to know you. And honestly, Anna and I just like talking data. So if you want to talk data, talk to us. I'm trying to look through. We have lots of questions here, and I'm not going to get to all of them. I know that. I'll tell you what. If you all sent the question in and I did not answer it, we will go back through the questions, and I promise you we will email the answers to each of you. And again, if any of you all would like to meet with us one-on-one, we're here and we're available. Remember that we've got more stuff up and coming, and like I said, a lot of it is more like free training than webinars. So I hope everyone enjoyed today. I hope everyone sees the differences between a JDE specific tool like DAS and a vanilla tool like Power BI. And I hope that you can clearly see that DAS is a self-service tool when it comes to JD Edwards, but Power BI may not be. It may be more of an IT tool. With that, I think we're going to wrap up today. So thank you all very much. Enjoy your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.